Jerem.
Here.
Melton.
We're about to start, so we'll have to wait.
Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Here.
Harding. Mr. President.
Here. Would everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? But I wanted to announce, first of all, that there will be a presentation of colors today by the Utah Girls Academy. So as they march in, and when they present the flag, then we'll say our Pledge of Allegiance. And our invocation today is by Councilmember Brinker Harding. Ladies. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guard, carry colors. Ready, cut. Forward, march.
Mr. Harding, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I simply just want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and hope that you can share good food and good conversation with family and friends and maybe even enjoy one more Nebraska football game this year, because it will be the last one of the year. And have a good Thanksgiving. Thank you.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Omaha City Council. The council thanks you for joining us this afternoon. As a courtesy to those who in attendance, we would ask you to turn off or mute any of your electronic devices. Madam Clerk.
Item 6, a resolution to approve a special use permit application submitted by Rainwood Hill Properties, LLC for a major amendment to a special use permit to allow non-protrusible landfill in an AG district located southwest of 120th Street and Rainwood Road. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on agenda item number 6 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve item 6. There are no lights. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 6 is approved 7-0. Item 7, an application to consider a Class C liquor license with growler endorsement for WFM Nebraska LLC, doing business as Whole Foods Market, located at 10020 Regency Circle.
Public hearing on agenda item number 7 is today. Proponents, please.
Hi, my name is Tim O'Neill. I'm with the law firm O'Neill Heinrich in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I represent Whole Foods. This is a pretty straightforward application. It's a reorganization as a result of Amazon buying Whole Foods indirectly up the food chain. And so we're distributing the assets down to a subsidiary. Same operations, same people, same location. It's just a corporate restructuring. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve item 7. No lights. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 7 is approved 7-0. Item 8, an application to approve a Class I liquor license for PRM Exarban LLC, doing business as My Pie Pizza, located at 1303 South 72nd Street, Suite 108.
Public hearing on agenda item number 8 is today. Proponents, please.
Yes, Blair Horner, managing member for PRM Exarban LLC. Address is 1770 North Colson Avenue, Fremont, and the location 1303 South 72nd. I'm just here to answer questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Second, no lights, roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 8 is approved, 7-0. Item 9, an application to consider a Class K catering liquor license for the Berry and Rye LLC, doing business as the Berry and Rye, located at 1105 Howard Street.
Public hearing on agenda item number 9 is today. Proponents, please.
Yes, Ethan Bondwood. I'm the owner of Berry and Rye. Our catering business has picked up more, so we have a need for a full-time catering license, and here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Can you give us an address too, please?
6810 Underwood Avenue, Omaha,
Thank you.
Nebraska.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve item 9. No lights, roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 9 is approved, 7-0. Item 10, an application to appoint Paul D. Hyde as manager of LM Omaha, Inc., doing business as Sheraton Omaha Hotel, for their Class C liquor license located at 655 North 108th Avenue.
Public hearing on agenda item number 10 is today. Proponents, please.
Hi, I'm Paul Hyde from Sheraton in Omaha, 655 North 108th Street. Just here to answer any questions I can for you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve item 10. No lights, roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 10 is approved, 7-0. Item 11, an application to appoint Katie Broman as manager of Omaha Community Playhouse for their Class C liquor license located at 6915 Cass Street.
Public hearing on agenda item number 11 is today. Proponents, please.
I'm Katie Broman. I'm the Executive Director at the Omaha Community Playhouse on 69th and Cass, 6915 Cass Street, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Festus.
Thanks, Mr. President. Ms. Broman, this being your first time down to City Council and being relatively new at the Community Playhouse, I just wanted to say thank you for your leadership there to a great institution in the community and certainly in my district. And wanted to give you a chance to provide a quick update on what's happening at the Playhouse. I know we have, for example, the Christmas Carol taking place right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for giving me the opportunity, and thanks for having me down here today. We did just open the 42nd anniversary of A Christmas Carol on last Friday, so that's certainly become a holiday tradition in Omaha for a long time, and that runs until December 23rd. We also are opening the 10th anniversary of yesterday and today, this Friday. That is the Beatles cover band show with Billy McGuigan and his brothers, and that's in our smaller space, the Howard Drew Theater. And so it's really two great opportunities for holiday shows. And actually, tomorrow morning, we see off our national tour of A Christmas Carol. So we have a professional touring company, and that company is going to be taking our version of A Christmas Carol across the country. So that's something that we're very excited about also.
Great. Well, thank you. I know those are very popular events here in Omaha, so I wish you well in them, and motion to approve.
Thank you so much.
Been moved and seconded to approve item 11. There are no lights, no further lights. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 11 is approved, 7-0. Item 12, a resolution to grant approval to EHPV Lottery Services, LLC, to operate a Big Red Keno satellite location at Twisted Post 14901 Industrial Road.
Public hearing on agenda item number 12 is today. Proponents, please.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, my name is Katrina Coffey. I'm Vice President of Marketing for Big Red Keno. We're located at 11248 John Galt Boulevard. I have with me today the owner of the Twisted Post, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve item 12. No lights. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 12 is approved 7-0.
Thank you.
Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
The public hearings on agenda items numbers 13 through 18 were held on November 7th, 2017. Is there a motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve. No lights. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 13 through 18 are approved 7-0.
The public hearing on agenda items numbers 19 through 30 are today. If you wish to address the City Council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by your name, your address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or an opponent. Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Is there a motion? Moved and seconded to approve items, 19 through 30. There are no further lights. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 19 through 30 are approved 7-0. Item 31, a resolution to approve the Hinky Dinky Number 3 Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan for a redevelopment site located at 4801-4811 Northwest Radial Highway in an amount up to $262,000.
Public hearing on agenda item number 31 is today. Proponents, please.
Yes, good afternoon. Don Seaton, City Planning. I think the pictures are going to tell a nice story here. The Hinky Dinky Number 3 TIF redevelopment project plan involves a comprehensive rehabilitation of the historic brick building located at North 48th Street and along Northwest Radial Highway. The building is historically a grocery store. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. It's this building right here. And the developer is using both state and federal historic preservation tax credits for the project. It was built in 1925. It's in fairly rough condition and is in need of revitalization. There will be 3 commercial bays when the project is completed, and the tenants will include a dance studio, an ice cream shop, and a small neighborhood grocery. The owner and developer is Mr. Lawrence Butler. As TIF projects go, this one is really rather on the small side, but it's located in a prominent spot, and it's also really an area where some economic revitalization is definitely needed and would be appreciated. That's the picture of the building about a month ago or so. Total project cost is $2.7 million. The amount of TIF support requested is $262,000. Public improvements include sidewalks, curb, gutter, decorative street lighting, and some landscaping. The land uses are appropriate. The project is in compliance with the city master plan, and it meets all the required criteria of the TIF program. The project's been approved by the TIF committee and by the planning board. We ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Need a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Festus.
Thanks, Mr. President. We talked about this project significantly a couple weeks ago in the first couple of rounds of approvals, but just wanted to note again, it is a great project and a great location. Appreciate Mr. Butler's investment in it and for being back here again today, and look forward to being completed. So I think there was a motion, and I'll second it. Thanks.
Thanks. It's been moved and seconded to approve item 31. There are no further lights. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 31 is approved, 7-0. Item 32, a resolution to approve the Alice Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan for a redevelopment site located at 1609 Binney Street and 2922 North 16th Street in an amount up to $78,000.
Public hearing agenda item number 32 is today. Proponents, please.
Yeah, Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning, here for this project as well. I've placed my notes somewhere. One moment, please.
Okay.
My apologies. Okay. This one's kind of similar to our last project in a number of ways. Same developer, Mr. Lawrence Butler. It's also a historic property. Thank you, sir. The name of the project is the Alice or Atlas TIF Redevelopment Project Plan. It involves the rehabilitation of 2 historic buildings. They're on adjoining sites along Binney. One's on the corner of 16th and Binney, and then right next to it. Historic preservation tax credits will also be used for this project. Let me show you the buildings. That's the historic Atlas or Alice apartment building. It has both names on the historic register. That's why we have the 2 names today. And then the property next to it will be a commercial office space of about 2,262 square feet. And I have a little better picture of that one. Both of these buildings are in pretty rough shape. The apartment building has code violations. TIF project will, of course, take care of those. And the roof on the commercial building is failing. Also, this is, again, a fairly relatively small project as projects go, TIF projects go. But it is in a fairly important area. This is the Shannon Heights Senior Housing. That was a city project. A lot of single-family housing in the area. It's also been recently developed as city projects. The total project cost is about $1.4 million. The amount of TIF support requested by Mr. Butler is $78,000. Land uses are appropriate. Projects in compliance with the master plan. And the city planning board has approved it. We ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Could I ask a question of Mr. Butler, please? You knew I wasn't going to let you get away. You know that, didn't you? I didn't. First of all, your name and address for the record.
Lawrence Butler, 1609 Binney Street.
Mr. Butler, first of all, thank you for continuing to invest in the community, badly needed projects. Give you an idea, just give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what you want to do with these 2 particular properties.
These 2, the Atlas is a historic 4-plex that we're going to convert into 5 low-income housing tax credit units and 1 market rate unit. The building next door to it used to be the Jackson Variety Store. It will be a architecture and engineering hub that is in a badly needed area. I am a licensed civil engineer. Thank you. So this is the Atlas building. It's known as the Alice building, the Atlas building, and in later city directories as the Dallas building. So we don't know what name to call it officially yet. So, and then this building here is about 2,200 square feet, like Mr. Seaton said. It will be an architecture and engineering hub. About $3 to $5 a square foot market rate on the areas that are not being used as the architecture and engineering hub.
Thank you. Well, I think hopefully with the new building that once you finish the project, I think we're going to call it a renovated building, among other things. So, but I did want to thank you for continuing to invest in the community. It's badly and sorely needed, and efforts like yours continue to spur other developers to take a look at the area as well. So thank you very much for doing that.
No problem. Thank you for the compliment.
Public hearing is closed. We need a motion.
Motion approved.
Second. No further lights. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 32 is approved, 7-0. Item 33, a resolution to approve the settlement of the case entitled Philip A. Nielsen Collins versus City of Omaha in the amount of $150,000.
Public hearing on agenda item number 33 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Second, roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 33 is approved, 7-0. Items 34 through 42 are part of the legislative package for the second session of the 105th State of Nebraska Legislature.
Thank you. And I would like for Jack Chaloha, our city lobbyist, if you would, unless we vote him out this time, he'll be, no, I'm just kidding. City lobbyist, if you could run through a little bit of it, just give us an overview, if you would, please.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, council members. Jack Chaloha, city lobbyist. Items 34 through 42, as stated by the clerk, are our state legislative program for 2018. These items are brought to you either by the administration or individual council members or various departments. Meaning I ask for ideas. These ideas are shared with me. The resolutions come before you to ultimately discuss, debate, and vote on, and then we'll send them to the mayor for her review. And then that's how we come about having our state legislative agenda. There will be other bills that are introduced that may or may not want to take positions on later, but that'll be, we'll deal with those on a one-on-one basis as the session moves along. So looking at these items, item 34 was requested by the mayor and Councilmember Pete Festerson. This resolution asked us to take a look at the state fuel tax formula, and with that there's various taxes on motor fuels, which is ultimately then shared between the State Department of Transportation and local governments, meaning the counties and cities. We're asking to take a look at some of those formulas and see if there may be a way to change that formula in order for Omaha to receive a greater share. Item 35 was introduced at the, yes?
Can we do these one at a time?
We'll do them one at a time, and I just wanted you to give us a little bit of an overview of what the process is.
Okay.
And I think you've done that. We'll just take each item one at a time.
Okay, and then you'll ask for proponents and opponents, and then I can review.
Okay. Yes.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Madam Clerk.
Item 34, a resolution at the request of Mayor Gene Stother and Councilmember Pete Festerson to introduce a bill to change the Highway Trust Fund and/or the Highway Allocation Fund so Metropolitan Omaha is apportioned an increase in funds which is more associated with its citizens' contributions and its infrastructure needs.
Thank you. Public hearing on agenda item number 34 is today. Proponents, please.
Opponent?
Proponents first. Proponents? Seeing none, opponents.
Greetings, City Council. I'm Ricky Fulton, and I live at 410 South 82nd Street. And yes, our streets here in Omaha are sort of on the dangerous side, walking around my neighborhood and talking to my friends. We have potholes, we have intersections that are dangerous. We have a great need for more public safety on our streets. However, I rise and oppose to the city's request to the state because I'm not sure that the city will know what to do with the extra money, number one. And number two, I think it's a long shot that you could get the state to tweak the formula to give the city more money. After this came up, I was talking to a state senator, and she implied that state wouldn't look friendly on this request for more money, and she suggested that the city use the restaurant tax to help improve our roads. Also, I want to thank the city because I was just over at 52nd and Northwestern Radial, and I see that they are now painting white lines on the crosswalk for a safer crossing, and so we thank the city for realizing there is a problem and acting with public opinion. So I do think there's a need for additional streets, and I applaud Vision Zero. I think that's a good idea. Remember, when you approve streets, we want to move people. We just don't want to make them for cars. We want to make them for bicyclists, pedestrians, public transportation, not just automobiles. So if it does come before this, if you do get a bill in the legislature, I'll have to look at it then, but I think we should look maybe at more city money on our streets and not state money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'll just give a quick background on this as a co-sponsor, and then do that also to each of the next four that I requested be introduced as part of our legislative package. I'm pleased to be a co-sponsor on this with Mayor Stoddard. I think we've all had a lot of conversation about the needs in our community for transportation funding. And we know there's substantial $300 million for unimproved streets and probably $800 million in infrastructure overall. So the intent of this resolution is to craft something that could be amenable to state senators and the governor to have the state assist the city with those needs. But as we know, it's not going to be any one magic bullet to addressing this issue. It'll have to be a combination of things, I'm sure, from us increasing our resurfacing budgets to our bond issue coming up in the spring, to analyzing our street and highway funds and how we pay for our street lighting with the public power district, and possibly additional federal and state sources to make a difference in something that's this large of a financial challenge. So having said that, this is a general resolution to have that be part of our conversation in January, and I think it's well worth our time to be talking about this and seeing what can be done in a short session and or over the long term. So with that, I'd motion to approve.
Been moved and seconded. Mr. Pauls.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jack, could I?
Jack Chaloha, city lobbyist.
Although we know this would be difficult because we're dealing with 49 different state senators, but how did this formula or way of spreading the money around, how did that come about?
Well, it's rather complicated. It's my understanding that the general funding for street and roads in the state is dealt with on about a 50 to 55 year formula. Started in the late 1960s or 1970 roughly, where the state would charge a tax on motor fuels, and then with that they would portion it partly to the State Department of then called Department of Roads, and then they would share some of that money with the counties for their needs and with cities with their needs. As we've gone along, through the years, the state has amended their formula a little bit. They've implemented some other funding into it, whether they started with a excise tax on wholesale price of fuel, and they've added that in and apportioned it accordingly. Additionally, through the years, the rates on the motor fuel have been increased, or sometimes back when we had a variable, they'd be decreased if the state didn't have a need. Likewise, I'm trying to remember what year it happened, but the state legislature also voted and approved to put 1/4 cent of the state sales tax into this highway allocation fund. And so with that, it's a complicated formula. There's a chart at the Department of Transportation even to try to follow it. But in a nutshell, that's how we are arrived at where we are today.
But just recently, the 1/2 cent sales tax, was that not just within the last few years?
The 1/4 cent, that was in the last probably 4 or 5 years. And additionally, a couple of years ago, there was a bill passed which will incrementally raise the price per gallon by 2 cents a year to a total of 6 cents, I believe. So.
Okay. So primarily, the money comes, other than that sales tax, comes from the gas utilization of.
Absolutely. Anytime an individual or company fills their motor vehicle with fuel, you're paying a tax on those items.
Okay. Do you have any idea what the state population is?
I think roughly it's about 1.8 million.
1.8 million, and how many of those people live in the city of Omaha or the surrounding areas
I'm trying to
approximately?
think. Roughly last time I looked at our census, I think we're at about 440,000 in the city metropolitan.
Okay, so 1.8 to, I'm just saying half, just to make it easy.
Right.
Do we get that percentage, basically, the gas, does it come back to the city of Omaha in that proportion?
Well,
I'm just thinking we have cars.
I'd have to drill down on the statistics, but if you want to say our population's roughly a quarter, I'm not sure we share that much back. I might have to ask Public Works or Finance to weigh in on this, but you know, those are things to think about, though.
Okay, I'm just thinking when in our argument we ought to say, okay, the amount of people here, try to make some comparison there. I know
Right.
we live in the state of Nebraska,
Right.
but the formula was changed recently,
Mhm.
and those individuals are no longer in the legislature, so it may be a little easier. But we have to be fair because we're thinking of the state, we're thinking of 49 different souls down there trying to make a decision how to share these dollars. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. There are no further lights. It's been moved and seconded to approve item 34. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 34 is approved 7-0. Item 35, a resolution at the request of Councilmember Pete Festerson to state support for LB 194, introduced by State Senator Tony Vargas, to change provisions of the Credit Services Organization Act, Delayed Deposit Services Licensing Act, and Nebraska Installment Loan Act to regulate payday lenders and control usury interest rates.
Public hearing on agenda item number 35 is today. Proponents, please.
Jack Chalaw, city lobbyist. Item number 35 is fairly self-explanatory by the resolution. LB 194 was introduced by Senator Tony Vargas from Omaha. It had its public hearing during the 2017 state legislative session before the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. That bill has sat in the committee, meaning it hasn't been voted out. It hasn't been indefinitely postponed. But with that, Councilmember Pete Festerson is asking for the city's support of this bill.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? And welcome, Senator.
Thank you very much, Councilman Ben Gray and everybody else. I want to do a special thank you to Councilman Festerson for his partnership, his understanding, and his action on this issue that is extremely important to our workers and our families and is negatively impacting our economy. I want
For
to
the
give
record,
you,
though, Senator, I need to get you your name and address.
Oh, I could do that, yes. Senator Tony Vargas, my address is 713 Coniglia Plaza, Omaha, Nebraska, 68108.
Thank you.
All right. I'd love to give you a short overview of payday lending, LB 194, and then touch a little briefly on some developments that have occurred at the national level. I want to be brief about payday lending in general. Put simply, payday lending is a practice that traps borrowers in a cycle of debt, which is incredibly difficult to escape. Borrowers get stuck in this debt very simply. They walk into a storefront, they show proof of income, they're given a loan for a few $100s, and as a result, as they have to pay back the loan in a few weeks in the next payday, but if they can't afford it, they have to pay that whole sum. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. They have to pay it. And if they can't afford it, one of the only avenues to be able to afford it is taking out another loan to then pay off the other loan, and then another, and then another. Until months later, you may be thousands of dollars in debt. This cycle, and what we're seeing in research from the Pew Institute and many other research, is showing us that this happens to almost 80% of borrowers. This problem is pervasive. It touches people from all different backgrounds. It affects those that are low income, middle income, black, white, Latino, civilians, veterans, faith leaders, college graduates, parents, grandparents, and the list, it goes on and on. At the hearing in LB 194 this last February, there were hours upon hours of testimony from borrowers and the family of borrowers who have been affected by this. A mom who needed money to put new tires in her car, a worker who needed money for epilepsy medication because even with health insurance they were unable to afford it on their own, A young minister who had to cover hospital expenses for his two daughters and who suddenly became sick, a military leader who saw how lenders threatened active duty borrowers, a senior citizen who, after her husband of more than 50 years died and his Social Security payments stopped coming in, had to find a way to make ends meet for her household. This issue doesn't just impact individual families. It also impacts our economy. A 2008 study that measured the economic impact of payday lenders in the Omaha metro area showed that $19 million is lost as a result of this how the current industry operates, and about 180 jobs are foregone from our local economy due to the excessive interest and fees charged by payday lenders. Now, aside from the fees and the balloon payments that too often lead borrowers into this cycle of debt and this debt trap, there are other issues that the state must fix in our current law. Our law currently states that a borrower cannot take out more than one payday loan at a time. However, there is no enforcement mechanism. There's no central database for this, so if a borrower needed to make more than a legal allowable limit, he or she can take one out and go to multiple storefronts that have different owners, and there is absolutely no way that we would ever know or they would ever be able to account for it. The Department of Banking has the ability to audit payday lenders and assess fines if any infractions are found. A report released by Nebraska Appleseed just this year shows that many times it is often the same offenders committing the same infractions. These fines are assessed and sometimes paid, but these bad actors are still allowed to remain in operation. Now, on LB 194, the question you might be asking yourself is, how is this supposed to going to fix the problem? What LB 194 does, in short summary, is that it makes the fees on the loans more reasonable. It ensures that the payments that people are making are affordable and are repayable to the borrower. In doing that, it ensures that we are still creating access, maintaining access to credit through this, but we're also making sure that it's not getting people into a cycle of debt that is going to then further and put them down a path towards poverty. Now, at the national landscape, about a few months ago, the Federal Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, published a new rule regarding payday loans that will help protect consumers. This rule does enact many of the same reforms LB 194 does. What it does do is it assesses the borrower's ability to repay. It restricts the total time of indebtedness to 90 consecutive days in a given 12 months. 3 consecutive loans will trigger a 30-day cooling off period for the consumer where no borrowing can be permitted. It also allows banks and credit unions to offer affordable loans with permission from their regulators, which is, I think, another alternative to this to make sure that there is credit and some loans available. I believe this new rule is a necessary first step, but there's still more that needs to be done and to ensure payday lenders aren't able to wiggle around this type of regulation. And I do think it includes making sure that we are looking at legislation that is going to not just apply to loans that are less than 45 days, which is what the CFPB rule does, and our current statute, which is a maximum of 34 days. What we see in terms of trends across the country is once there have been payday loans, and let's say if they've been outlawed in some states, which is not what we're trying to do. When they've been outlawed, there's been new legislation being introduced that provides a longer-term installment loans, but still very, very high interest. And that's something that we really want to work around because there was a bill introduced this last year from former Senator Craighead, and that bill was an installment loan. A larger amount of money can be taken out in larger installments at a very, very high interest rate that we're looking around 200%. Even though that's still lower than where we currently are, that's still not reasonable, and that's still not right for consumers and for working families. And so we want to make sure that we are continuing to find a reasonable, actionable solution to keeping credit available, but making sure we're protecting consumers at all costs. The only other things that I want to be able to share with you are just around the data points. We continue to see that people are churning on these loans. The first time they're taking out loans, the average churns is around 10 different loans that they're churning. Right now, about 71% of the U.S. population live in a state where they authorize high-interest payday lending, and that is changing. 14 states have no payday lenders whatsoever, including the District of Columbia. I believe that this is a truly bipartisan effort. I believe in the institution of the legislature, which is why I introduced this and initially co-sponsored this with, and is still co-sponsored by Senator Lewin Linehan of Elkhorn, because we believe that there's more we should be doing to protect working families. Since then, we've had more co-sponsors come on board because they also want to support this effort from both sides of the aisle, including the chairwoman of the Business and Labor Committee, Senator Joni Albright, and Senator Carol Blood, and Senator Pansing Brooks. I want to thank you for taking on this issue and coming out in support of it potentially, and I really ask you for your support on this, and thank Councilman Festerson for bringing this forward, and hopefully we can continue to provide access to credit and make sure we're protecting consumers as best as we possibly can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Good afternoon. My name is Julie Kalkowski. I live at 3511 Webster Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68131. I'm speaking as a proponent of this bill. For the past 12 years, I've been kind of raising the cry that this is really negatively impacting our community. I was able to get funding to have an economist look at the negative impact that payday lending has on our Omaha metro area, and that was referenced by Senator Vargas, and I've sent that to each of you. What I want you to know is that I am speaking today as Julie Kalkowski. I do work at Crane University. I'm not representing them. I'm also on the Consumer Financial Protection CAB Board, the Community Advisory Board. I am not speaking on their behalf. I'm speaking as a citizen. Just a few things you need to know about payday lenders. According to the Center for Responsible Lending, the average payday borrower repays $793 on a $325 loan. There are more payday lenders in America than Starbucks and McDonald's combined. And if we had a payday loan alternative from a credit union or ones that follow along the lines of Senator Vargas, it would generate $24 million in new economic activity. So that would be really wonderful. But I do want to talk to you briefly. I work with single moms. I provide a program on financial education, financial coaching, and we have heard countless horror stories. One woman brought in her payday loan documentation showing that she was paying 920% interest. And that's according, like Senator Vargas said, there's no enforcement. So people have no option. So the other thing is I ran into one of our, last November, we do woohoo moments, because single moms, it's really stressful with your money. And we do woohoo moments showing that other single moms, you can do this. So one woman stood up and she said, I know we always talk about taxes and our earned income tax credit every November of this session, but do you know what? This is going to be the first time in 2 years that I'm not taking my approximately $4,500 refund and paying off 6 to 8 payday loans. The first time. She's so excited. She needs some medical treatment, and she's going to be able to get it this year when she gets her refund back. So it puts payday loans the way they're currently structured in Nebraska, puts people in a downward spiral of debt. Very few people, less than 20%, can ever repay it in 14 days. So I urge you to support Senator Vargas's proposal.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Good afternoon. I'm Amanda Brewer, and I'm the CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Omaha, and I'm representing the organization at 1701 North 24th Street. I'm here representing the communities that Habitat serves, working families at 30 to 60% of HUD median income. Incomes between $19,000 and $36,000 a year. Most importantly, these are families with jobs and bank accounts, but families whose circumstances may make them the target of payday lending. I'm here in support of LB 194, and I stand with Senator Vargas and very pleased with the work that he has done and a large group of nonprofits and corporations and citizens who care. It has a negative effect on our families that we have seen firsthand. I know 2 families who've lost their Habitat homes because of payday lending. What people don't understand is that it's one loan, it's a $500 loan, but you're paying that same loan back month after month after month. The woman that worked with us at Habitat is an employee, and she had to borrow, take a payday loan for $500 to get new tires on her car. It took her 8 years to pay off that loan, $10,000 later. In the meantime, she lost her house, and she lost a lot of other things, including her dignity. And what she said, and why this is so hard, is that there are alternatives. People do have alternatives, but it's an embarrassing problem. So instead of seek alternatives when you have a financial problem, people go to payday lenders and start in that debt trap that Julie was talking about. There are alternatives in our community. One such alternative that Habitat created as a response to this problem is a zero-interest product. It can be as low as $500 or even less dollars for people to make repairs on hot water heaters or furnaces in those emergency situations. So we encourage you to support this bill and Senator Vargas, and we thank you for your leadership in this.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Give it to our clerk, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Morley. My address is 105 South 9th Street, Unit 307, Omaha 68102. That's the BB&N Runyon condominiums. I am here today speaking on behalf of Omaha Together One community, and I'm speaking in favor of your proposed resolution that would support legislation in Lincoln to provide needed reforms to the payday lending activity in our state. I'm a volunteer with OTOC's Payday Lending Reform Action Team. Over just the last 4 weeks, we have held 5 House meetings in several West Omaha neighborhoods with about 40 participants all total. And just this last Friday evening, we held an OTOC Issues Cafe at Urban Abbey in the Old Market, where we had about 50 people attend from throughout the city. Now, those aren't huge numbers, and it certainly isn't a scientifically determined random sample of the people of our community, but I can tell you that the reactions are pretty uniform among the people that we've been talking to. And that is shock to find out what kind of a debt trap that people can get themselves into through the payday lending activity, and in disbelief at finding out that potentially a person can pay fees that would result in upwards of an effective annual interest rate of around 460%. Now, others speaking to you today in favor of your resolution have gone into details and will be going into details, so I won't do that. But I will say that I believe that the current law that regulates payday lending in the state was enacted in 1994, and that it was enacted with the best of intentions. But over a period of years, there have been unintended consequences with its implementation. I believe LB 194 provides a sensible reform alternative to our current law, and I think it recognizes the importance of the payday lending industry locally, because it is. Certain people with little credit need to have access to short-term loans. But the reform of LB 194 also provides protections to people who find themselves in that situation. So OTOC urges you, City Council members, to approve this proposed resolution in support of LB 194. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Good afternoon, President Gray and members of the Omaha City Council. My name is Julia Zeh, and I'm here on behalf of Voices for Children in Nebraska in support of this resolution. Voices for Children in Nebraska is a statewide child advocacy organization. For 30 years, we have been the independent voice building pathways to opportunities for all children and families in our state through research, policy, and community engagement. We believe that children do better when their families are thriving. We were at 7521 Main Street, Suite 103. We believe that children do better when their families are thriving. A significant body of research supports the fact that children's outcomes are linked to family income. When we talk about poverty, we often talk about family income, but the way to really address poverty in a meaningful manner is to look at the systems that either increase or decrease financial stability for parents. As previous proponents have already testified, we have some of the highest allowable loan rates in the country at 461%. Current payday lending laws hurt families and drain money from local communities. The consequences of these policies are most acutely experienced in our most vulnerable communities. That's particularly clear in Omaha, and as you can see in the map that I've attached to the written comments, payday lenders tend to be concentrated within or near the neighborhoods with the highest level of poverty. Nebraska can't afford inaction on policies that trap families in a cycle of debt. New child development research links parental unsecured debt to poor socioeconomic development in children. We must work towards common sense policies that are responsible and based on a borrower's ability to repay, instead of a system that diverts family resources and attention away from positive investments in our children. Research shows that the public is also with us on this. A recent AARP survey showed extremely strong support in Nebraska for payday lending reform. Of the 950 Nebraskans surveyed, 77 were in support of laws that would cap an annual interest rate at 36%, and 72% agreed that monthly fees should be an affordable share of the borrower's monthly income. The intensity of this support has been echoed across the country, and it is clear that the American public wants action. Earlier this year, as Senator Vargas mentioned, the CFPB issued a final rule that will largely address many of the concerns that we've identified. That's an important first step, but Nebraska has a crucial role to play still in protecting its residents from harmful lending practices. 16 jurisdictions have prevented short-term payday lending, and more than half of all states have capped interest rates on longer-term loans. LB 194 would complement the CFPB rule when implemented by aligning payday loans more closely with the traditional loan structure that most folks use. The changes are similar to legislation enacted in Colorado, which has led to some industry consolidation, but for the most part did not put the payday lending industry out of business. LB 194 would preserve access to payday loans while reforming a predatory business model that intentionally traps hardworking families into a cycle of debt. We will only end the cycle of poverty by ensuring that families have access to fair financial resources, and we would respectfully encourage your support of this resolution.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the council. My name is Ken Smith. I live at 316 South 50th Avenue here in Omaha, Nebraska, 68132. I represent Nebraska Appleseed, which is a nonprofit public interest law firm and policy advocacy organization, and I'm here as a proponent of this resolution. LB 194, as those who have gone before me have said, converts our current payday loan model into a more affordable loan product that can be payable over time. Julia before me mentioned that this is a model that's in place in Colorado. I just want to add on top of the fact that there is still access to credit widely available in Colorado. They've seen a drop in the default on these types of loans, and 50%, the lenders that were in business before this legislation was passed, they are continued to issue loans today. So I think it's also important, I just want to take a minute to push back on one of the more common arguments that I've heard against this type of reform, and that is that LB 194 would put payday lenders out of business, and the government should not put businesses out of business. I think this argument loses a little bit of weight when you consider its historical context. Nebraska, like every other state in the country, has a general usury statute. So in Nebraska, we have decided the maximum interest rate that you can charge on a loan or forbearance is 16%. I think we enacted that in the 1970s. And then nearly, I think about 20 years ago, maybe a little bit more, the legislature passed the Delayed Deposit Services Licensing Act, and it specifically exempted those licensees or payday lenders from complying with our general usury statute. So about 40 years ago, Nebraskans decided that you shouldn't be able to charge more than 16% on a loan or forbearance. And then the payday lenders came in about 1994 and asked to be an exception to the rule, and that request was granted. But now, since we've seen, and I think it's clear from what you've heard in the testimony today, we've seen how harmful this loan product is to our communities and our families, and that it saddles generally low-income communities with crippling debt that's very hard to get out of. And so in light of that, we're not asking the state to repeal the Delayed Deposit Services Licensing Act, nor are we asking the state to completely eliminate or outlaw payday lenders, as many other states have done. We're simply asking the state to implement common sense consumer safeguards that make the loan product itself less destructive. So to those who would argue that what we're asking in LB 194 is not the role of government, I would submit that it's not just the role but the duty of government to step in when it's made a mistake and pass common sense protections for our families and communities that have been harmed. And that's what we're asking of the Nebraska legislature through LB 194, and so that's also what we're asking of the City Council here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Luis Jimenez, 3126 Chicago Street. In 2006, Mohammed Yunus, a social entrepreneur, banker, economist, and civil society leader, who is also called the banker of the poor, was the Nobel Prize winner for pioneering microloans. A microloan grants small loans to poor people who have no collateral and who do not qualify for conventional bank loans. It's helped many out of poverty in Bangladesh. A novel idea, Mr. President. Another great thinker, Senator Bernie Sanders, proposed that the U.S. Postal Service manage similar loans. Perhaps this concept can be brought to function through city action. You're already incorporating nonprofits, and perhaps there is a way to charter a microloan bank or produce another entity such as a nonprofit that can administer such a program. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
My name is Sam Carwin. I live at 4635 North 94th Street, 68134. I believe that reform is needed to protect the hardworking individuals like myself in this community. I have had at least 2 jobs since I was 19. However, due to working primarily in social services field, my income at times did not cover all my expenses. At 22, I became a single mom while in my 4th year of college. With my full-time coursework, I prioritized jobs that did not interfere with school and allowed me to spend time with my son. The income from these jobs at times did not cover all my expenses, so I sought out paycheck advance locations. Though I know these places provided money in the short term, overall, it did not allow me to work towards long-term stability. With reform, I could have obtained the additional money that I needed without the undue burden of paying it back within 2 weeks. I know that people need access to additional money beyond what their paycheck provides. However, this money needs to be regulated appropriately to align with the income of the borrower and ensure borrowers can pay it back as well as cover their ongoing expenses for themselves and their family.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard?
Good afternoon. My name is Brad Hill, 2106 South 138th Street. I'm the president of the Nebraska Financial Services Association. We recommend payday lenders and check cashers in the state of Nebraska. I'm also an employee of one of those companies. I've been in the business for over 30 years. I'm a lifelong Omahan. Our group would like to ask you to oppose this resolution. We see it as anti-business. It would be a job killer. And probably more important, it would restrict access to credit for a lot of people. Contrary to what we've heard from a lot of people today, in my time in the business, all I've heard is people saying thank you when no one else would help us. We get referrals from banks and credit unions. They're not interested in making an unsecured loan. We provide a service. We have a rate. It's a free market society. No one forces our consumers to come in the store. Our customers vote with their feet. We don't advertise. We provide a service. In a free market society, people are responsible for their own financial decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. I just wanted to thank Senator Vargas for his leadership on this issue and for being here today, and also Senator Linehan and all the organizations that are here in support of this resolution. I often comment that I think one of our biggest challenges as a community is poverty and the economic disparities that we experience, and there's no single answer, so there needs to be lots of answers to that issue, and this council has engaged in many of them, from job training to summer jobs programs, SEB support, early childhood programs, after-school programs that we support, but I also see this resolution as being part of that picture and an important piece of it. As Senator Vargas discussed, the parameters of this bill are reasonable. It doesn't put anyone out of business. That's certainly not the intent. But it's not okay to be charging someone 300% and 400% interest, and it does contribute to this cycle of debt that's of concern to us and throughout our community, and I think is very much on evidence when you look at the maps and the data presented to us here during testimony. So last year, I sent a letter of support for this bill to the Banking Committee, but my intention this year was to get all of us, hopefully, in support of this issue to help push it forward or something similar to it through the Banking Committee this year in short session, because I think it is an important issue for all of us to weigh in on. Lastly, I don't think I saw them here, but I know they sent us all emails and submitted a letter, so I wanted to acknowledge their participation as well. The Nebraska Catholic Conference submitted a letter, a very strong and convincing letter in support of this issue to us today as well, that I know is part of the public record. So with that, I'll go ahead and motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second. Mr. Pauls.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a couple of questions. Senator Vargas. I have a couple of questions for you and also Mr. Hill. One thing I do appreciate that you don't want to shut it down. I think that was a mistake, because this came before when I was chair of Banking, Commerce, Insurance. They came up, they wanted to shut it down, shut everything down, and I think that was a mistake. I see that your bill has some attributes that I see in a positive way, because you're trying to make this work. The thing that surprises me, when I was down there, it said something about like the credit unions are going to establish a process where they could get loans at a certain relatively good interest rates. Did that not happen?
So to answer your question, credit unions are providing loans right now, but you have to be a member of the credit union to then be able to access it. So it's still not a longer-term solution yet for all people that are seeking a short-term solution.
But that, see, that's what it caught me off guard a little bit, because somebody said their interest rates were high at credit union. But are their rates what they should be?
Their rates are much lower. They're in the double digits.
So, okay,
yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Then maybe part of it is to the education process that we're missing. I'm not necessarily supporting payday lenders, but I'm just saying there are options out there that apparently people do not know about. Is that?
So yes, first you have to be able to qualify, obviously, to be a member of the credit union, and then the second piece of it is I think there does need to be more education. I agree with you. Part of this legislation also provides education on the front end when individuals are coming to then take out loans. We're asking to do some more front end worksheet analysis. Let's say, for example, when you're going to apply for a house and you're doing some sort of financial analysis worksheet planning, we're asking in this bill to the same exact piece or a similar piece to be done in this legislation as well, so that people are starting to do some planning. But then on the back end, if the only option then is available is between single small digits, between 20 and 35%, to then 460%, you're not really providing multiple options that are encouraging people to find a safe pathway to taking out loans and paying them off in a reasonable time scale.
Okay, and here's another thing that it caught me a little bit off guard, and apparently it hasn't happened. I thought that there was going to be some type of system. If I would go from one loan, I just couldn't be bouncing around getting from, like, say, a half a dozen payday lenders. That's not.
There was legislation introduced in the past, but that did not get through. This was before my time.
Okay.
But you're talking about the right manner, the right solution to one of the problems. If we cannot provide some accounting mechanism, we account for mechanisms in corrections and probation and juvenile justice and health and human services in banking with all other loans, but we don't in this industry.
Okay, and you're attempting to do that in one.
That is not in this legislation.
Okay.
That is a whole separate other something that we want to be able to solve. Okay. But for the purposes of this, I think the long-term intention is we've seen other examples of caps just on interest rates, and that's it. And then what we've seen in some of those states is just capping interest rate and not doing analysis of how do we make sure that we're reforming the industry, reforming the regulation in what I think is a more common sense approach, then we will not have access to credit. And again, what we see in Colorado is access to credit is still available. We saw some lenders, I think it's 50% consolidation. Those lenders that were no longer there were not around for a reason. I think they were not there because of their profit model. What they were actually trying to do wasn't working. But for the 50% that are there, they have a similar number of loans that are still being taken out. They're being paid on time. Interest rates are providing them with a steady flow of revenue to be able to continue to grow. And as a result, we have lower defaults and we have fewer loans that are being churned. Okay. And that's exactly, I think, what we want.
So that's what you're saying, trying to change the business model of the payday lenders.
Mm-hmm. And there's research that has been coming out that's showing that that's the most responsible manner to then go about making sure we're keeping access to credit and then keeping industry, keeping access to credit, making sure it is always, in the first and foremost, affordable, that they were not going to be able to pay more than what they can afford.
A couple more questions. Yeah. One would be at the federal level. They've made some major changes. Would that make some of the things that you want mute?
Mm-hmm. Some of them would. They are similar and they would complement. But here's a little bit of the rub. The federal administration. This is a ruling from the CFPB. It is still subject to approval. It doesn't go into enactment until 2019. And so whether or not this goes into place during that time period and whether or not it even sticks, it still needs to, Congress can still overturn this if they want. So we don't know. And I'm more of the mind of let's make sure we are changing our state laws to make sure they're meeting the needs of Nebraska rather than waiting for the federal government to tell us what to do.
As I watch TV, I see people advertising payday on TV. Would this have any effect on that? If I can go out of state by...
So there are online lenders and this applies to online lenders. This applies to any lenders that are providing a short-term loan. That's in the redefine that definition statute to make sure it applies. Because the other piece that we're seeing, and I think one of the counter arguments to this is that if there aren't payday lenders, then people are going to go to more unsecured online loans. This law still applies to online lenders as well as those storefronts that are currently operating under the current CSO statute.
One final question. I see a lot of percentages have been tossed out, but I see that, are you satisfied if the max would be 36%?
So I am, let me clarify two things. When we're talking about the APR is not what we're talking about. We're talking about what the interest rate feels like as a result of the combination of fees and interest and the structure that we put in to make this loan affordable. And that's similar to what the Colorado had put in legislation. And what that did is it isn't an interest rate cap in itself, unlike some other loans. What this is doing is ensuring that there is still a steady stream of income, and then at the end of the day, on a typical loan, it would feel right around the 36% to 40% mark. That's what it would feel like, as opposed to saying just interest rate cap on all loans is this. We still want to make sure that every month that people are paying off their loans and that income is going to the lenders, and then that is going to be coming in every single month and is affordable based on the person that's borrowing the money. And so it's a little different than we usually think of APRs.
Okay, so when I look at my bank statement, if I fail to make my payments, it can go up as high as 29%.
Yeah. So this would wouldn't cap it, it would be around 36%. The way it does this is through fees and maintenance fees and making sure we're structuring. That's the reason why we didn't put in, if we put in just an all cap, what we've seen in other states, there was South Dakota, they put a cap in, and there wasn't any structure taking into account how they can still maintain revenue. Based on our modeling, this still brings in revenue, and it's around 36%.
Okay. So in other words, maybe we ought to look at some of the bank statements and say, let's drop that 29 to 12.
No, I appreciate
I'm just, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's that? Yeah, oh, this wreck, deja vu. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Does that conclude your comments?
Yeah. Pardon?
That concludes your comments?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Palermo.
Thank you, President Gray. LB 194, I've not only seen it firsthand, but I've been in this impossible hole to dig out of. This is a first step, and it's about time something's being done to help break this cycle of poverty. So I want to thank you, Senator Vargas and Councilmember Festerson, for bringing this resolution forward and your bill. So thank you.
Thank you. And just my reaction to that is we've heard the stories. So the good part about this is we've heard both the stories, we've heard the economic impact, we know what the research tells us, and most importantly, we created this law. The legislature created this statute. We have gone through bouts of, obviously elected bodies are always looking at reasonable ways for laws to then support business and then also support consumers. And when it tips too far into an imbalance, is what we're seeing, that's when I believe it's important we have this legislation, which is why I'm proud to have supporters on this issue from across the aisle that understand this and appreciate your story. It's just encouraging.
Thank you. Ms. Melton. I'm sorry, Mr. Palermo, were you done?
Oh.
Okay, Ms. Melton.
Oh, thank you. Senator, thank you for coming down and explaining all of this to us. And I guess I have a question. Between payday loans and kind of conventional loans or credit card. So if you don't pay your car payment for 30 days after, then like the credit people, Experian or TransUnion, you'll get a ding on your credit. Well, these are short term. So do they go on somebody's credit, or when do they go on somebody's credit, or do they not affect somebody's credit so that makes them a little more, or do they even check credit?
So they don't check credit. That's why I was shaking my head. I'm like, well, if somebody goes into default and then there are
the
credit callers, judgments on the back end, then something can go back on your credit score when collections and things like that come into when there's when collections takes into account, right? So, but on the front end, they are not checking credit history, credit scores. That's not a component of it currently.
So even if somebody does take out these payday loans and pays them back, I mean, maybe that's what they're doing. It actually doesn't help their credit either.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, at this point, it sounds like that more likely than not, their credit would be harmed. And so I guess I'm glad that that's not going on their credit. But it also doesn't track the number of loans they have out there, because normally you can do a credit check and see the number of credit cards people have out, the loans they have outstanding versus what their income is. So in what you're telling me in this particular case, there's no way to check to see how many payday loans somebody has outstanding?
There is not a database that allows for that level of transparency and accountability. That's correct. And pretty much in every other, and I sit on the Appropriations Committee, and pretty much every single other agency that I work with, I ask the question when I'm appropriating and I'm considering the effectiveness of a program, how do we account for accountability? How do we make sure things are protected? This is one of the exceptions to the rule. We do not have a mechanism for accounting for that. So even when there is a fine, or if there is an instance where they're not appropriately abiding by the statute, there's not a real mechanism to continue to follow through on whether or not they're still doing it. Consumers are really left in the dark.
Okay. But these places they get a special license. So
yes,
they could lose
they have
their
to.
license.
So you have to apply for a license. That's why when we say this is not an unregulated, this is a regulated industry, and that they have to apply for a license, they have to meet a certain number of requirements. and they do have to submit some information, but that is not part of their, whether or not somebody has other loans in another place is not a part of their component of whether or not they offer a loan or at any point or in their model whatsoever.
Okay.
Because they don't have access to that. They won't know. On Dodge, there's two right in the same vicinity. They don't know if somebody goes to their loan to storefront and the other one goes to the other storefront, and they take out one. They have no idea.
It doesn't. Okay. Well, I want to thank you. You know, I've looked through this, and actually just wanted to call Mr. Hill back up. But Senator, I think that there's a lot of discussion that still needs to be had in this bill. I do appreciate this bill versus previous bills that we were just saying, hey, we have a problem, let's just eliminate it completely, because I do think actually we need to have lenders that are willing to lend to people who don't have credit. I would like to see people be able to build their credit with some of these things, but right now I'd be afraid it would hurt people's credit more than build it. So I want to be cognizant of that we don't take away somebody's ability to get their car fixed so that they can get to work and they don't have any other means to do it. So I think your bills probably has some good balance in there that I would like to see more discussion. And I'd like to continue to follow this and have more discussion with you. And I appreciate the efforts, and I think that this would be a good thing that both sides, I think, could come together down there and make something better. But I wanted to ask, I don't want to just make this sound like, yeah, we're gonna do this, because I think there are some other things we could do. So I was wondering if Mr. Hill could come back up just for a couple questions. But there you are. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Hill.
Yes.
And I want to thank you, because I think what it sounded like today was just everybody that's involved in payday lending are.
We're blamed for the ills of the country. That's correct.
I understand. I just wanted to call you back up after listening to Senator Vargas and kind of this bill. I don't think he's trying to get rid of payday lending whatsoever. Is this something that you would be willing to work with him on trying to maybe come up with some compromises like other states have done in order to because I think you also have to understand some of the problems that are being created. I understand free market, but there does have to be a balance between, sometimes morality and,
I have a lot of respect for Senator Vargas. He was in my office recently with a couple other state senators, and we had a discussion. And we're open to more discussions. One thing I'd like to add is this really isn't consumer complaint-driven legislation. The Department of Banking, the Better Business Bureau here in Omaha gets virtually no complaints on us. The vast majority of consumers are happy with our product.
Well, and I don't know I can't tell you about their complaints. I can tell you that there are people on this council that have gotten the complaints, and a number of, and I myself have.
Okay.
In my other life as a lawyer, I've seen a number of these cases with some of the clients and people that I've tried to help.
Okay.
So I do see sometimes the problem that it creates, especially for young single moms that are just kind of getting into working and balancing the payments and things like that. It does take some time, and people can be taught, but sometimes you get so far into this that it's almost impossible to get out.
I understand that. I understand that happens.
Okay. So I guess I would hope that dialogue between the two of you continues, because I would like to see your businesses stay open. You do provide jobs to the people in our community, and you provide credit to people that may not be able to get it elsewhere, because the credit unions and the other banks are not providing that.
Absolutely.
So I do hope that the two of you will be willing to kind of work together on this moving forward. So that's why I'm supporting this today, because I would like to keep that discussion going forward. I think we can make things better in this, not just in your industry, but for the people that are utilizing your services.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Howell.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Vargas, can I have you come back up, please?
Happy to.
Thank you. Actually, a lot of my kind of thoughts or comments were probably very similar to Councilmember Melton's, but in the beginning, I kept hearing the access to credit, and I kind of leaned over and I said, "What? explain to me how this is really credit. It's not, you're not getting access to credit. I want to make sure that we're clear that, as you explained to Ms. Melton, that this isn't credit, but that term of art, I think, is confusing.
Yeah. And to clarify, this is more for those that have better credit. For those that don't have good credit, this is their only avenue to taking out a short-term loan. And it doesn't improve your credit directly, right, because it's not being reported. So this is a short-term solution to a longer-term problem. So yes, that's a correct analysis of the term, of the misnomer of the word credit.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. A couple other things. And I know you covered the federal regulations that I know are kind of looming out there, and whether or not they get implemented. And I know you're trying to be proactive in that manner, so that, you know, if they aren't there at the end of the day or in a couple of years, that we have something to address the issue. And today, I wonder, clarify it for me if you could too. When we're talking about people having the ability to go from one location to another, and walk me through the process a little bit. Aren't they required to have a paycheck in order to get the loan? So how are they going to multiple locations?
If I have a paycheck and I go in, from what we've heard from payday lenders, it's just a very easy process. I think that adds to some of the, if it's easy to get the money and there isn't a sort of a back-end evaluation of financial literacy, they go in, you verify income, they give pay stubs, post-dated check, or they give access to direct deposit in some instances, and then they get their loan, and they can go to another place and go through the same process.
So in your proposal, and I also read through that as well, but I don't remember this, so help me. In your proposal, how would the process change so that we could eliminate the possibility of that happening?
You know, one of the components that we wanted to make sure to include in here is that that people are starting to, when they take out the loans, that the loan is affordable over a specific amount of time. If it wasn't affordable in the 2 weeks, is what we're seeing, that let's make sure that these small-term loans are affordable based on their income. So we use their annual income to then determine how much they can pay to the loan every single month. And then that also determines how long the loan will be lengthened. And so instead of, let's say, 2 weeks, $500 loan will be somewhere around 3-4 months. And that what we're doing there is then creating a steady stream of income every single month. And then what we're also doing is making sure that the borrower is paying back the loan in smaller increments, as opposed to the one balloon sum payment that has to happen at the end of 2 weeks. That's where this gets tricky. The balloon payment, and if they have access to your checking account, that means, hey, 2 weeks rolled around, I know I don't have enough money in my bank account. That money is coming out, whether I want to or not. And if it's going to come out, I don't have enough. There's going to be fees incurred on my bank. And if you've ever been in that cycle, that also accumulates fees from your bank as a result of overdraft. So you proactively then go to the store and then you take out another loan to make sure that this doesn't happen, so that you have the money in the bank to then be able to pay them. And that's how the cycle goes. And so the way that we're trying to treat it is not saying you wouldn't just be, there's a monitoring system necessarily. In this, we're saying, let's make sure any of the loans are always affordable and that they can never get out of hand, so that people are responsibly borrowing, paying off their loan, and if they take out another loan, that's fine. But then they're still not having another loan or churning. And what we saw in the Colorado model is exactly that. People were still taking out loans, and it was they paid off the loan, they took out a loan, paid it off, and then they would go back and get another loan at some point. And there's nothing wrong with that. It was the borrowing to churn that happened as a result of the small 2-week cycle and it being unable to pay it back in a short time.
Okay. Will this be a priority bill of yours?
I have not determined what would be my priority bill yet,
okay.
But that's a great question.
Okay. Thank you. I just was going to close with a couple of comments. I wanted to thank you for bringing actually this forward, and you and I just had a chance to talk a little bit briefly beforehand. I did have an opportunity to talk with Mr. Hill yesterday too, and I am going to be supportive of this. I know your bill did not make it out of committee last year. I know that I've heard some willingness both on your part and Mr. Hill's part about working toward a solution, and that's what I think is very constructive about this process. And I think the key word here is reform, and we'll work toward reforming this. And I think as we bring minds together, I'm sure and confident we'll get to something that's palatable for all. So thank you, and thank you to Mr. Hill for your willingness to try to work through this issue through the unicameral this session.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Is that complete, Chair? All right, Mr. Pauls.
Thank you. Mr. Hill, I just have one or two questions to ask. I apologize. I thought I was overdoing my time here. And this is will probably not get out of committee unless the two of you guys get together, to be honest with you. You're going to have to. This is a thing to sway me. I keep hearing, I bought a set of tires, and it ended up costing me several $1,000s. Or I see here interest rates 461%. Do you see how that affects people's internal being?
The APR is an outlier. That's per year. We charge 15%. We do loans for 2 weeks or 30 days. So if you write a check for $100, you get $85. It's a flat 15%. People throw the APR out, and I don't think it's fair.
Okay, so
it's not a yearly product.
You take the money, you take it out before I get it.
I give you $85.
Out of
I have a $100 check that is worthless for 2 weeks until I negotiate it. That's correct.
Okay. So then if I can't pay, then I have to come back and...
Well, you either pick up the check or we deposit the check, one or two.
Okay, okay.
And I think it's a good thing. There's been some controversy about, in Nebraska, the check has to be deposited in 34 days. In a lot of states, you can keep rolling the check over. You hear these horror stories that a guy paid $2,000 for a $200 check. In Nebraska, that can't happen. The check has to go in, and regardless. So you're not charged, and we're only allowed to charge $15 if the check's returned also, which is much lower than a lot of people charge these days.
Okay, so these 460% is a misnomer. I mean, that's...
I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a few comments that I would like to make. I don't have any questions. Mr. Chiloa, would you go to the microphone, please? I don't need to ask you any questions. I just want you to put the map up that Voices for Children has about where the payday lenders are in the red dots, and the areas where people are most in debt. I want people to see that. Not just the people here, but the people who are watching television or who may see the replay. I want them to see this. And in the meantime, I'm going to try and be a little less upset about how I feel about this, because the fact of the matter is I would like for all of them to be closed, because all jobs are not good jobs. But let me say this. When you're talking about, and I'm going to talk historically for a minute, specifically in North Omaha, but in parts of North Omaha and portions of South Omaha, the eastern parts of the city, we're talking about individuals who financially aren't as literate as they probably should be. And there are efforts underway to try to help people become more financially literate. So when the comment is made is that they're happy with their services, the fact of the matter is they're trapped by their services. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. I had a young lady, a mother called me. We had her daughter was being threatened by gang members to go get these payday loans. I was involved in this, to go get these payday loans. The woman was, the young lady was in debt. It ended up getting the mother in debt. I had to address the scallywags that were part of the payday lending who are not good administrators. I had to address the gang members, and I had to talk to the families about that, and to sit over and over and over again and listen to the cries of people who can't pay things, who can't make it, who get these loans and then get further in debt than they were in the first place, is unacceptable, and it ought to be unacceptable to all of us, especially when you look at a map like that and you see the concentration of where these issues are. This ought to be unacceptable to all of us. There ought to be changes based on this, based on what you see in this map. Those changes ought to come, and we ought not even question why there ought to be changes. All we need to do is look at that map and understand that for over 40 years in North Omaha, there was a lack of investment. There was a lack of opportunity. There were limited jobs. And now we're going to come with a predatory organization, and we're going to continue this cycle for a number of people. I'm dissatisfied with it. The fact of the matter is, we keep talking about this being the first step, and I agree with you, Senator Vargas, this is a first step. We can agree to disagree on how good or bad the first step is, but the fact of the matter is that what we see here ought to be discouraging to all of us, and it ought to be something that we ought to take into consideration and really seriously sit down and do something about. We have been preying on people in these areas for far too long, and we need to address it some kind of way. I will be supportive of this legislation. I will be supportive of it because it is a first step, but understand what I'm saying. People are trapped by this. People are not necessarily happy about the service as much as they are trapped by the service. This is a disgusting display to me. And I will end my comments there, but I will be supporting the legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chiloa, for putting that map up, because I want not only people here, but people in the community who may be watching this to see what that map looks like, and then try and tell me that we're not being predatory in some fashion. That begs the question. It doesn't answer it. There are no further lights. It's been moved and seconded to approve. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Pauls. Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Absolutely.
Item 35 is approved, 7-0. Item 36, a resolution at the request of Councilmember Pete Festerson to support a bill, if introduced, to allow mental health professionals to seek to initiate protective custody based upon similar authority as peace officers have now.
Don't worry about it. Go ahead.
Jeff Chiloha, City Lobbyist. Item number 36 is a resolution asking to support a bill if it's introduced. Right now, only sworn peace officers have the ability to initiate protective custody if an individual is found to be a danger either to themselves or to the community. This resolution would ask mental health professionals to also have that authority.
Thank you. Public hearing on agenda item number 36 is today. Proponents, please.
Thank you for this opportunity to address you today. My name is Sarita Penka. I live at 1305 North 129th Circle here in Omaha. I am an OTOC Mental Health Action Team individual, and I want to tell you a little bit about our team. This team consists of mental health professionals. There are nursing professors, retired MDs, counselors, and a lawyer who deal with mental health issues. There are also family members like myself who have loved ones diagnosed with mental health needs. Our OTOC action team supports this resolution and would support any legislation to allow mental health professionals to initiate protective custody processes. It is often a person's mental health professional who first sees the signs that a person is entering into such an acute mental distress that they would need emergency protective custody. Mental health professionals have training to better assess a person's current mental state, and often they have had more contact over time to know whether that person is in such a bad place that there are serious dangers to themselves or others. My 57-year-old brother, diagnosed with bipolar disease, would not return our phone calls or answer his door. The police eventually accompanied us to his apartment and had to ultimately knock down his door. This was traumatizing to my brother and to our family. Ultimately, he was taken into protective custody. This should not have to be a police issue. It is a medical, psychological issue. OTOC supports a legislative bill to allow mental health professionals to initiate protective custody before the police need to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Festus.
Thanks, Mr. President, and thanks for sharing that story. I appreciate that. I want to address maybe a little bit of background on this item and also the following item, both of which I introduced and that pertain to behavioral health, and then just say something brief about each of the details. So overall, the legislative package we've been talking about today and that we usually do each year and contains a number of important things, but many of them are perennial topics like transportation funding and certain law enforcement issues. But to my knowledge, this is the first time we've been involved in supporting something like behavioral health needs in the community. And I did that intentionally because I want to send the message that we all need to own this issue and we all need to work together to make a difference on it, because there aren't any easy answers. And because 1 in 4 families in our metropolitan area are impacted by behavioral health needs and issues, and that impacts all levels of government, city, state, and federal. So I've been especially interested in the intersection of law enforcement, the county jail, and providers on this issue recently. And it's not based on any particular incident, but I think all of our awareness has been increased recently about all that we do ask our police officers to do, and we ask a lot of them in many respects, but also in this respect to be in the first line of response in many instances. And in both of these cases or both of these resolutions, that may still be, they will still continue to be involved. It may still be the first line of response in many cases, but that's not always ideal and doesn't always lead to the best outcomes, and I think there's some approaches in these resolutions that can lead to better outcomes for everyone involved, including our officers. So big picture, I do think it's an issue that relates to Medicaid reimbursements, and I think it's an issue that relates to crisis intervention training, and we're doing more of that in our public safety offices, police and fire. It may at some point include embedding a crisis intervention team or training team in those departments, and it probably requires something like an assessment center where everyone's cooperating and referring to resources and helping folks in crisis. But in the meantime, these two measures, I think, can help set the stage for those things and make some progress, and I think can be consensus items, allowing mental health professionals greater access and authority in emergency situations. So I've talked a lot about this with Chief Schmaderer, and he's addressed our Public Safety Committee. He's very much on board and supportive of these issues, as is Director Foxall, the county jail. I talked with him just again this morning. County commissioners approved both these measures just this morning as well. I was pleased to work with Commissioner Borgeson, and I see Commissioner Rogers in the audience here, who are both very supportive of this as well as my conversation with the provider community. So number 36, in a nutshell, what this would allow is it would allow mental health professionals the ability to initiate emergency protective custody. Right now, that can only be done by a police officer. By allowing both a police officer and someone credentialed in mental health, as I mentioned before, I think can lead to better cooperation and better outcomes for everyone involved. The credentialing is typically someone who has a doctor's certification in psychiatry, or a nurse who has those same kind of certifications. But details on this would be to be determined, because I think, as I said before, we all own this issue. We all need to be working on it. I wouldn't see the city as being the lead on it, because there are so many other entities involved in this and that need to be involved in this, and that do have much more expertise than we do. But I think we need to be supportive, which is why it's stated as support if introduced. And I do think there's a lot of interest in this particular item in Lincoln as well. So with that, I'll close my remarks on this one, but I will acknowledge Commissioner Borgeson, who just walked in, to thank her for her work on it as well with the county board this morning. I'll motion to approve.
Second. Moved and seconded to approve. Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sarita, if you would care to answer this, if you come up to the podium, I don't mean to use your scenario as an example to ask my question. If you're not comfortable with that, I can certainly. You brought the scenario about your brother up. If I'll ask the question, if you don't want to be personally involved in it that way, I respect that.
Yes.
And I'll just ask it generically to maybe Mr. Festerson. But I just want to make sure I understand the process as well. So in your scenario, how would that situation have been handled differently had we had this in place?
My guess, or an idea, would be that instead of having to go through the legal system of the courts, that we could have gone to my brother's doctor, because he is an SSI individual, and he doesn't see his doctor very often, and when he does see his doctor, he is on his very best behavior. And so anyway, if we could work hand in hand with his physician and maybe a psychologist with him, then he could ask my brother to come in and to ask these questions. This is part of a much bigger thing that's working now, because even in the federal courts, they're trying to get family members involved, and that has not been entirely, well, it has been partially passed. So, in doing that, we would not have had to knock down John's door. We could have had it done with the doctor. This has gone on for a very long time. I've been working with him and the city, the state, since he was 23 years of age and was diagnosed with schizophrenia at that time. We have now, ultimately, has been suggested, and we have done this. We have created a person in the family that is his what's the word?
A guardian.
Guardian,
yeah.
yes. And we've been to court, and it has turned out well now, because the family member that is the guardian is able to speak with the psychiatrist. And we had a learning curve on that. We were trying to baby him or act as a parent, but we've learned to give him his independence, and yet there are times when we have to work with him and his doctor.
Okay. Thank you. And again, I didn't mean to have you personalize it. You brought if you didn't want to answer it, I understand. I hope you didn't feel pressure to do so. But okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just kind of confirm with you, P. You kind of see that as the scenario of how it would work out.
Yes. So of course, one of the big challenges with behavioral health is every scenario is different, and every individual is different, and it's complicated. But in this instance, it greatly increases the possibility that a mental health professional would be involved in a situation like this, wouldn't have to call the police necessarily, and wouldn't potentially cause some of the situations we've seen where the outcomes aren't ideal, or where arrests need to be made, and instead, when in reality, if a doctor seeing a client can handle the situation on their own without threat of the individual being a danger to himself or to the public, it's a much better outcome, I think, for the physician, for the patient, and for the police.
Okay, thanks. Did you model this after another state that I could maybe get a little more information on?
Yeah, there are many other states that have done this, and as I mentioned before, many states do it differently, and there's lots of different models.
Right.
But most of our surrounding states have something like this, as well as the next item I'll describe.
And again, I know this just says support if proposed, and we don't know what the particulars are, but I'll be supportive of this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. There are no further lights. There's a motion and a second to approve. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 36 is approved, 7-0. Item 37, a resolution at the request of Councilmember Pete Festerson to support a bill, if introduced, to allow transporting of behavioral health protective custody patients across state lines in order to have access to more beds and to work together as a community.
Public hearing agenda item number 37 is today. Proponents, please.
Jack Chaloha, city lobbyist. Item number 37 is kind of a 1-2 punch, if you will, from Councilmember Festerson. This is the second of the two parts that he wanted to introduce today relating to mental health. And this is asking for support if legislation is introduced.
Thank you. Number 37, are any proponents wish to be heard?
Thank you. I so appreciate being able to speak to this issue. My name is Sarita Penka. I live at 1305 North 129th Circle here in Omaha, and I'm a member of the Omaha Together One Community Mental Health Action Team. We support the concept of transporting patients out of state for mental health care that is not available here. Those could be facilities as close as Mercy Hospital or Jenny Edmondson Hospital in Council Bluffs, which is just across the river. Due to monetary restraints, I believe that the state will not be transporting patients a long way out of state unless the special care needed would warrant it. One of our action team members has a son who needed transport to a special care unit for OCD in Texas. This treatment was not available in Nebraska anywhere. Our psychiatric inpatient care in Nebraska is pretty basic at times, and for some difficult problems, transport out of state may be very important. OTOC would endorse your support of such a bill, but would want to review any such bill before working for its passage at the unicameral. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Welcome, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Mary Ann Borgeson, B-O-R-G-E-S-O-N. And thank you, Councilman Festerson, for coming over and talking to me about the mental health issues that you had on your agenda that we copied on our agenda this morning to work together on. As the chair of the Region 6 Governing Board, which oversees the behavioral health services in the 5-county area, this is a good move for us to work together on this because we can't do it alone. And there are a lot of issues that start with the contact that law enforcement has with these individuals that we think can be interventions be created to keep them from being arrested or brought to our jail system. So we appreciate your attention on this, and again, we supported the items too, and we'll garner our support and work with you on these as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. It's been moved and seconded to approve item 37. Roll call. Oh, we didn't do that? I'm sorry. I thought you did. Okay.
No, so this is a different item, but I will make that motion here in a second.
Okay.
Also, I want to thank Commissioner Bergerson for her remarks as well, and I look forward to partnering with the county board on these items. So I won't go into any more background as I did. I think that covered both these issues. I see them as companion issues. The nature of this one, of course, it is a state law. This would apply throughout the state if approved. But for the interest here in the metropolitan area, my main objective in submitting this was to send the message that we need to be working together as a metropolitan area, whether that's Omaha or Council Bluffs, on our needs. Because frequently what I think we experience with emergency protective custody is a shortage of beds in Omaha and in Council Bluffs. So what this would allow is reciprocity for when someone is taken into emergency protective custody they could be taken to beds in Iowa if no beds were available in Nebraska, and vice versa, therefore having better access to the treatment system. So with that, I'll motion to approve. Thank you.
Second. Moved and seconded to approve. This time, Mr. Pauls.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jack, could I have you come?
Jack Chaloha, city lobbyist.
I need you to help me here. As I can recall, do we not send people outside the state of Nebraska right now who need additional help?
Boy, I really can't answer that. I apologize. I'm not certain.
I thought in some situations we did. I don't know why. Okay, well, if I don't have the answer and you don't have the answer, I guess the question has been answered.
The only scenario I could think of is maybe if an individual was found to be in need of assistance downtown, and we did find their license and they're a resident of Iowa.
Okay.
You know, that's the only thing I could think of.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Pauls, I think the answer to your question might be, I don't think it's about behavioral health, which is why I think the bill is a good one.
Yeah.
But we do it for criminal, if we don't have places to put them in a locked facility here, then we do have the option of moving them to other states.
Okay, thank you for straightening out my gray cells.
Thank you, Steve. Okay. It's been moved, I'm sorry, Mr. Harding.
Just a quick question for clarification. When I spoke with you earlier, Mr. Festerson, do we not, we have an agreement with, or Iowa has an agreement with Nebraska currently, it's just that we don't have that reciprocity with Iowa, correct?
I believe Iowa has a law in place that would allow reciprocity, but because we don't allow it, it doesn't happen very frequently.
Okay, thanks.
It's been moved and seconded to approve. There are no further lights. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 37 is approved, 7-0. Item 38, a resolution at the request of City Council Member Amy Melton to introduce a bill to create the Combined Sewer Overflow Infrastructure Assistance Act by refunding growth in state sales tax of 5.5% on sewer use fees to cities with federally mandated CSO projects.
Public hearing on agenda item number 38 is today. Proponents, please. Explanation, then proponents.
Okay, yeah, Jack Chaloha, city lobbyist. Item 38 is a request to introduce a bill at the 2018 state legislative session. Currently, as you know, we're under a federal mandate to separate our combined sewer. It's an expensive project. In order to pay and finance some of it, we've issued bonds. We've had to increase our sewer use fees. Unfortunately, sewer use fees, like occupation taxes, are subject to sales tax. Therefore, as our sewer use fees increase to pay for this project, the amount of sales tax paid on them also increases. Councilmember Melton looks at this as a fundamentally fair issue of fairness and thinks that some of this growth in revenue to the state should be shared with us, which is the city under the mandate.
Thank you, Jack. With that, are there any proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, yes?
Luis Jimenez, 3126 Chicago Street. I'm a proponent on this item.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Harding. Oh, you don't have your light on? Okay, Ms. Melton.
Oh, thank you. I'll be brief. I think the council understand this. For the general public, we're being taxed on our assessment that we were mandated to do by the federal government. So really what I'm asking for is, I'm just asking for that tax that we're paying on our, what we don't call a tax, we call it an assessment because it's a mandate by the federal government. But this council knows we're going to have to increase that again in the next year. I think we haven't put a time frame on there, but it's scheduled according to our agreement with the federal government. So if the state never counted on this money to begin with, they're kind of getting a windfall on it. So what I would like to see is that at least those taxes get returned and that they would go directly into our CSO project, that the money wouldn't just necessarily come back here, but it would go into that CSO project and you know, the roads and all the costs that has to go into it. And maybe, just maybe we'll be able to keep that assessment a lot lower for the people in the city of Omaha, because we're paying quite a bit, and it's not going down, it's just going up. So if we could just get this little bit back, I think it would be very helpful. And I understand that people who live west of Omaha probably don't care about this problem. But I think we care about, I think the people in Omaha care about the rest of the state, and it just may be that we can convince some of the other senators that this is the fair thing to do. So we'll at least give it a try. And I know Rich Pauls has been talking about this since he was in the legislature, so maybe this time we'll actually get it done, right?
Is that a motion, so I don't forget? Motion to approve, moved and seconded to approve. Mr. Pauls.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jack, can I get because this is such a serious thing, and I think Councilwoman Melton has a very good idea here. If we could recapture some of the dollars that we are sending to Lincoln, just give us just a little bit of history on this so the public understands that we're not asking for anything that's probably not necessarily due to us.
Right, that's Jack Chaloha, city lobbyist. As I tried to explain, currently the city of Omaha is under a federal mandate to separate our storm and sanitary sewers so they don't go into the same drainage system. This is my understanding. We're going to spend about $200 billion. Is that correct? $2 billion, excuse me, I overstated it. $2 billion, which is still a lot of money, but $2 billion. Sorry, I'm getting on federal money here now, sorry. $2 billion project. With that, in order for us to pay for this, the feds have mandated it. We get very little, if any, federal assistance to pay for this project, so it's being financed by our citizens of Omaha. Right now, we issue bonds and do projects accordingly, and we have to pay off those bonds by increasing sewer use fees. As was stated, these sewer use fees are subject to state sales tax. So every time I pay my sewer use fee, the state receives 5.5% of the amount for their state general fund. And so because of the fact that we have to increase our fees to continue paying for our project, the state is receiving a revenue windfall, if you will, on the backs of the citizens of Omaha who are mandated to pay for this project. Back in 2010, there was legislation brought to try to exempt this totally from the sales tax mandate, and that bill fell flat, didn't make it through the legislature. There have been some attempts to try to capture the incremental growth and turn it back, but it hasn't met with success either. But nevertheless, because of the circumstances, we feel that we should try again.
Well, wouldn't one way of being the money that we receive, if we do share some of that with some of these smaller communities for their, quote, their sewer systems? I mean, did we not do something similar to that with the...
One of the bills did offer a set-aside of the funds, if you will, the growth and sales tax of an amount. A similar project that we do now is on the turnback for the CenturyLink Center. 70% of the sales tax goes back to Omaha to pay for the bonds, and 30% of it goes into a fund to help with grants for smaller communities in Nebraska. Maybe something like that could be modeled in order to give the legislation a bump. Right now, though, the only community under the federal mandate similar to ours is Omaha. Plattsmouth used to be, but they've paid off their project. So.
Right, but I like the idea of flowing back out to the smaller communities, because I know one community, Atkins, Nebraska, got a library out of the money that they received from our city. So right. Some of that will allow you to use some of your brain cells.
There you go. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Palermo.
I have one more question, yeah. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. So, refresh my memory. Have we ever asked for this assistance before?
Yes, Jack Chaloha, city lobbyist. We have asked for this type of program before. Former Senator Heath Mello introduced a bill. I don't have the number in front of me. He was successful in getting the bill advanced out of the Revenue Committee into the floor of the legislature. It did advance through the first round of floor debate, but after that it didn't advance any further. some of the concerns from other senators were they couldn't afford to give up the revenue. They looked for the growth in sales tax to help balance the state's financial needs, et cetera, and so therefore it didn't get past the finish line. 2018 could be an uphill task for us again, as the state is suffering from some economic decline in their budget, but nevertheless it has been tried before.
And, okay, so we have asked for it before. How long have we known this sewer separation was coming?
Boy.
I would assume a long time.
Oh, I would think, I don't know, a decade or 2 decades. I'm looking to Public Works to maybe weigh in.
72.
72, okay, under the Clean Water Act of 19...
Under the Clean Water Act.
Right, so that's 40-some years now, yeah, so 45
so
years.
Help me figure this out as a new council member. We've known this is coming since the 70s, but we're just now asking for assistance on it?
Well, I know we've...
That's another thing.
Yeah.
If we could talk afterwards, I'll
Okay.
talk to you about it afterwards. Because
That's fine then, thank you.
Thank you.
There are no further lights. It's been moved and seconded to approve item 38. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 38 is approved 7-0. Item 39, a resolution at the request of City Prosecutor Matt Kuzi to introduce a bill to reform the process for prosecutors to appeal a case or ruling.
Jack, did you want to do it, or you want Matt to go? Okay.
I'll start off. Jack Chaloha, City Lobbyist. Item 39, as stated, is from our City Prosecutor. This would ask us to introduce a bill. It has to do with legal procedures relative to appeals for prosecutors, which hopefully Matt Kuzi will be able to explain to you why there's a difference.
Thank you. Are there any proponents who wish to be heard?
Good afternoon, Matt Kuzi, City Law Department. What I'm asking the council to consider is just a couple of changes to the current model, statutory model for the appeals that prosecutors can use. As a right, the Supreme Court has said numerous times that prosecutors don't have a right to appeal. So if I lose at a trial, it's not like I can ask for a second at bat if someone is acquitted. That's not the purpose of it. The purpose of the appeal statutes for prosecutors is to clarify issues of law. If I believe a court has made a fundamental mistake in something, I can ask the higher courts to review it and to provide guidance for future courts. The current statutory makeup, I won't bore everyone with it, was originally drafted in 1959, and not last time it was amended, it was in 92, and the 92 amendment was only changing one word. It's incredibly burdensome the way that the statute is currently written. I have 20 days to do this by this date. I have 30 days to do this by this date. What I'm asking for is just a simple model that Councilmember Jerem and Councilmember Melton can understand for appeals. All a defense attorney has to do to appeal something is file a notice of appeal with the higher court, and that's it. They don't have to go through any other type of process. What I'm asking for is the same model, that I be allowed to say I'm filing a notice of appeal, and then it moves forward from there. That's really the only change to the statute that I'm looking for in that regard. In addition, the current model that allows an appeal of an excessively lenient sentence, currently only the county attorney on felony cases can ask for that. If they feel that a district court judge has imposed an excessively lenient sentence, they can ask the Court of Appeals of the Supreme Court to change that. I don't have that option in this current makeup. Right now, misdemeanors are exempt, so there are conceivably opportunities not only in Nebraska or in Omaha, but across the state where a county court judge could have imposed an excessively lenient sentence on a misdemeanor case, and I think prosecutors should have the right to pursue that appeal up through the appellate process. Those are the changes that I'm looking to make to the current appellate statutes. The legislature typically likes to ask, what do other states do? And I did look at our surrounding states, and all of the surrounding states, that being South Dakota, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, do it this way in terms of all the prosecutor has to do is file a notice of appeal and move forward. It's only Wyoming that is different. Wyoming, for whatever reason, has the exact same statute Nebraska does, so they either copied us or we copied them. I don't know which, but only Wyoming's the only state that kind of borders us that has the same statutory framework.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Ms. Melton.
Brief comment. I know people who aren't attorneys often look at misdemeanors as, well, that's just a nothing charge. It's like a trespassing or something of that nature. But I can tell you in my work in the domestic violence unit, along with Mr. Kuzi, you're dealing with domestic violence, third-degree assault. You're dealing with violations of protection orders. And I can tell you in my time, and I know back in Mr. Kuzi's day, he could have told you that even in those misdemeanors, some of them are extremely serious. And there were oftentimes results that we got that should have been appealed, especially for purposes of the protection order, because there's issues of law, what should have applied for whether the protection order should have been granted or not granted. And I've been on both sides of it at this point. So I do think that we do need to have this for prosecutors to be able to file the notice of appeal. I mean, if their arguments don't have merit, that can be taken care of with the Court of Appeals or Supreme Court. But I don't think that they should be under any overly burdensome process that nobody else has to follow. So that's why I support this, and I do a motion to approve.
Moved and seconded to approve item 39. No further lights. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 39 is approved, 7-0. Item 40, a resolution at the request of the City of Omaha Police Department to support a bill, if introduced, to allow peace officers to return a child under 11 years of age to their parents after custody.
Public hearing on agenda item number 40 is today, and before I open the public hearing, an explanation, brief explanation,
Jack Aloha, City Lobbyist. Item 40 is a bill requested by the Police Department relative to their operating procedures. They write their operating procedures in accordance with state law, and they absolutely want to follow state law. Right now, there's been a gray area relative to minors or juveniles under 11 years of age, and whether or not, after the police have encountered them, whether they can immediately return them to their parents or not, or if they have to involve Health and Human Services. That's the issue before us.
Thank you. With that, I'm open to public hearing to any proponents who wish to be heard.
Mr. President, council members, Lieutenant George Merrithew, the Omaha Police Department. Here on behalf of Deputy Chief Greg Gonzalez. We wrote the policy to implement this law that took effect in July 1st of 2017 of this year. We immediately notified Jack, that there were some issues with this. And this came about because of LB, 684 or 894, that was a comprehensive juvenile bill. I have a copy of it here. It's 34 pages long, the LB is. It affected multiple statutes, and this is a very confusing issue because you have to start one statute, go to another statute, go to a third statute, and then go to a fourth statute. Basically what the unicameral did was they took away the right to arrest a child 11 years of age, younger than 11 years of age. We can't arrest them. The juvenile courts can't charge them with a crime. We as police officers can still detain them and take them into custody, which there's a very convoluted way the statutes are written. One gives us all the authority for all juveniles except those under 11. Then the other statute goes back and says, well, if they did the things that were listed here when they were over 11 or over, and they're under 11, then you can still take them into custody. The difference becomes what happens to them when we're done. If we take them into custody, a child under 11 years of age, so 10 and younger, we are required, the only thing we can do with them is to turn them over to DHHS, which in Omaha means they have to go to Project Harmony. We cannot turn them over to their parents. That would violate the statute. That's extremely problematic. We're in a situation where we could encounter a small child who has shoplifted a candy bar. Mom and dad want to do the right thing. They bring them back to the vendor. The vendor says, okay, yeah, I'm okay with that. You corrected it. They say, we want to impress upon our child the right thing. Call the police, please. The problem with that is, as soon as that's done, that vendor, that merchant, has taken them into custody pursuant to the shoplifting laws, and the only person they can turn them over to is an Omaha police officer. So now they're in our custody. Mom and Dad are standing right there, and for a $1.50 candy bar, we now have to go place them at Project Harmony. That's a problem. Last year, there were 41 children under the age of 11 that were arrested in Omaha. One of them was a felony. The other 40 were all misdemeanors, all minor things. They were all street released. 2 of them were not street released because they were more serious misdemeanor offenses. But the rest of them were all street released, back to their parents. So far, since this has taken place on the 17th, on the 1st of July, there have been 17 children below the age of 10 or below, that have been charged, or 7 of those are listed as arrested, even though that's an erroneous categorization because we don't arrest children under 11. But 7 of them are listed as arrested, which means something happened. We checked on those. In 3 of them, it's all the same case involving 3 different juveniles. They were erroneously street released. We addressed that issue because we can't street release them. The other 4 were all turned over to Project Harmony. And these are minor offenses. I didn't have time to find out exactly what those offenses were. But again, so far, we're in a situation where we're having to take children that could be fairly minor offenses, and we're having to basically incarcerate them and turn them over. That can obviously be very traumatic to a small child. We'd like to avoid that. I've been looking at this. It's extremely complicated. Been working with the county attorney's office and the juvenile division. We've been working with city legal. We've got a meeting next week, 2 weeks, with the senators down in Lincoln to try and come up with something. I think I've seen something in here where we can change this to what I believe the intent of the unicameral was, which means felonies. Right now it covers, one section covers misdemeanors not to include traffic infractions. The next one includes felonies. And the third one says all traffic infractions. So we pick up a 10-year-old that drives mom and dad's car and they commit a traffic infraction, we have to place them at Project Harmony. It doesn't happen a lot, but for those, so far 4 this year, for those children, it's just not the right way to handle this. So we would like to work with the unicameral and try and figure out a way to turn that discretion back to the officer who can make an evaluation if mom and dad or the guardian is the appropriate place to turn this child over, to do it without having to do the entire placement process through Project Harmony. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Matt Kuzi, City of Omaha Law Department. This morning at pre-council, I know Councilmember Melton and Councilmember Gray had some questions, and to the extent that I'm your criminal law advisor, I went and did some checking into it. And Lieutenant Marathew is correct. While I don't think that was the intent of the statute, in speaking with the county attorney's office and looking at the statute, and I'll 100% admit that I was unaware of this, and as I've said, I can count the number of my appearances in the juvenile court on one hand. But what I did find out that for children 11 years and under, no matter what the crime is, felony, misdemeanor, whatever, the child is placed in Department of Health and Human Services custody, becomes essentially a state ward, I'm told for at least 48 hours until the family and everyone is assessed by CPS. It is possible that the child is returned back to his parents, his or her parents, to live with them, but for that minimum 48-hour time period, they're still within the department's, or excuse me, at least 48-hour time period, they are still within the custody of the Department of Health and Human Services and are so-called state wards. I was unaware that the street release wasn't going on, and I'm going to guess that Councilmember Gray and Councilmember Melton were also unaware of that too, but they cannot be street released, children who are 11 years and under this statute. Again, in looking at it and talking to some people far more knowledgeable than me about it, it doesn't appear that that was the intent of the statute, but this is a indirect consequence of the statute. So I wanted to just let the council know that I did look into some of the concerns that they had, and I wanted to provide that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Good afternoon. My name is LaVon Stennis Williams, 1941 South 42nd Street, Suite 502, Omaha, Nebraska, 68105. I'm speaking on behalf of Reconnect, Inc. a nonprofit organization that serves youth and adults, and I'm speaking on behalf of our youth program, Triage. I'm a member of several juvenile justice reform initiatives, but I am not speaking on behalf of either of those initiatives. I stand in support of this effort, and I think the City Council should support moving it forward, because not just the spirit and what it represents about reducing the unnecessary involvement of youth in the child welfare system by even 48-hour placement can have impact, but because it's also going to open the doors for a much broader conversation. As a youth advocate and as a member of two system reform efforts, I believe the age needs to be raised. When you talk to people who were part of conversations that led to the law, you realize that the 11-year-old age or 11 and under age was the result of a lot of stereotypes that went on because of an incident that happened in the city when 3 young people were involved in a homicide or allegedly involved in a homicide. And so there's a lot of cleanup that needs to be in that statute, not just to make it consistent with what the officer testified to about the inconsistency in having to go through 4 different statutes. It makes no sense, but also because it will allow an opportunity for us to address the age and this artificial age, and where did that age come from, 10 and under. Another aspect by looking into this law in terms of an amendment is that it will open up the doors to make sure that there is compliance with the federal requirement of separation of sight and sound. Under the current law that they're seeking to amend, there's a provision that children 16 and older can be placed in the adult facilities if they're charged with a felony conviction. Only once in a statute does it make reference that that child should be separated from sight and sound from adults. That is a federal mandate, and we cannot just unilaterally decide what part of that provision we're going to enforce. If this city is receiving any federal funding, which it does, they're required to honor that. And it just makes good practice sense for us to protect our juveniles regardless of what they've done from adults, because we know the impact of what happens when a child is incarcerated with adults. There is mounds and mounds of evidence that says what it's going to do for that child long term. We also know that any system involvement, whether it's at the child welfare end or at the adult side, delinquency side, it exposes that child to a greater risk of criminality as they get older, especially in the cohort age group between 13 and 17. And so that is why I believe the age should be raised, because that age group is the one that's going to be most impacted long term. The opportunity for us to be able to clean the statute up once and for all will start by you all supporting the proposed legislation that's been offered to you today, and we stand in full support of that and hoping that this City Council will even dig deeper and go beyond what is being recommended in the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. My name is Janae Pancook, and in full disclosure, I'm the Executive Director of Operation Youth Success, which is working on juvenile justice reform for Douglas County. I am not speaking on behalf of Operation Youth Success. I'm speaking on behalf as a citizen. Address, is 6001 Dodge Street, Omaha, Nebraska 68008, I think is what UNO's my office location. At any rate, I'd like to, first of all, thank the Omaha Police Department for recognizing this aspect of the statute and understanding the trauma and the disconnect between looking out for the best outcomes for youth in our community and processes that they can do to influence the better outcomes. That's a big step, I think, in culture when you think about culture of understanding the ramifications to youth in our community and requesting that this legislation be looked at. I'm a huge proponent of this for that. They spoke to the trauma involved if a child is removed from their guardian or their parents, even for 48 hours, plus the demands that puts on an already stretched and exacerbated system within DHSS. Or Health and Human Services, my apologies. We need to continue to look at ways to reform that. Juvenile justice is an aspect of that, but there's the youth that are in both systems, juvenile justice and child welfare systems, and obviously this would be one significant aspect that could limit the number of youth that are engaged in a system that don't need to be involved in a system. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve item 40. No lights. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 40 is approved, 7-0. Item 41, a resolution at the request of the City of Omaha Police Department to include a bill to allow civilian police department employees who regularly, as part of their assigned duties, handle, process, or is likely to come into contact with any evidence or property which may include opiates to have immunity for using naloxone in good faith during an emergency.
Public hearing agenda item number 41 is today. Explanation?
Yes, sir. Jack Chaloha, city lobbyist. This came to my attention in the last month, whereby we put the resolution forward to you. We apologize that we didn't get it to your city council law committee in advance. There is legislation on the books now where certain individuals are granted immunity, including law enforcement officers or sworn peace officers, but not necessarily people that are civilians in our police department who would actually be handling opioids and need emergency treatment. Therefore, it makes sense that we would have this extension, and that's the explanation.
Thank you. Are there any, with that, open to public hearing, any proponents who wish to be heard?
Lieutenant George Murthy, Omaha Police Department. This is just a simple oversight, basically in the law. The legislature did a great job with this. They exempted from all liability of first responders, for the most part, fire personnel, paramedics, physicians, health professionals. They even went so far as to exclude family members and close personal friends who get the naloxone from a prescription that is prescribed to the person. Problem is, when they got to law enforcement, they strictly said peace officers. We have a lot of dedicated professionals that work in our property room that have to handle this every day. And if you're aware of fentanyl, a pin drop of fentanyl can send a person into total cardiac arrest. It can kill them. And for that reason, we have these kits down in our property room. Unfortunately, our other personnel that are down there share no exemption and no protection under the law from any type of liability or anything that could happen. So we would ask you to support this so that we can go and ask the legislature to just make a simple exception to include employees of police departments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed.
Second.
Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 41 is approved, 7-0. Item 42, a resolution at the recommendation of the Law Committee of the City Council to designate John A. Jack Chaloa as the official lobbyist of the City of Omaha.
Well, this is going to be a tough one. But anyway.
Jack Chaloha, city lobbyist. Explanation is this is a resolution we do on an annual basis to give me authority to act on behalf of the City of Omaha. I will now appear as a proponent in favor of this resolution. I asked for these credentials from you so I can represent Omaha at our state capitol, and sometimes I actually get asked for my credentials, so this would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Lieutenant George Murthy, I would be in favor of this.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Pauls. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I just want to thank you today, Jack. I think this is an excellent presentation of the legislative package today. I do appreciate it because you gave us time and you had some information to give to us to make it even clearer. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Second, roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 42 is approved, 7-0. Item 43, an ordinance approving a redevelopment and tax increment financing loan agreement with 563 LLC to implement the Bijou Residences Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan for a project site located at 563 South 18th Street in the amount of $246,757.
Public hearing agenda item number 43 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon, Bridget Hadley with City Planning, here to answer questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
Item 44, an ordinance to accept the bid of Abe's Trash, Inc. to provide seasonal rubbish container service for the swimming pools in the Recreation Division in the amount of $1,832, effective for an initial period of 12 months from October 1, 2017, and renewable for 2 separate one-year periods.
Public hearing agenda item number 44 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
Item 45, an ordinance to accept the Bureau of Justice Assistance Fiscal Year 2017 Criminal and Juvenile Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program Grant in the amount of $75,000 during the project period of October 1, 2017 to September 30th, 2018 to build the Heartland Crisis Intervention Team's capacity to comprehensively respond to people with mental illnesses in the Omaha metro area.
Public hearing agenda item number 45 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
Item 46, an ordinance to establish a new Class A flammable liquids storage district to be known as District Number A-159 at 2910 F Street, Gangstead Properties, LLC.
Public hearing agenda item number 46 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
The action on items 47 and 48 can be considered together or request by the applicant to move the public hearings for items 47 and 48 to the third reading on December 12th, 2017.
Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Oh, he's out of the chamber.
Festerson left the chambers. Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0.
I'd move to go into executive session for purposes of discussing labor relations negotiations only.
Non-action items.
She has to do non-action
I can do
items.
non-action items real
Right after she makes.
Non-action items, items 49 through 75, do not require a public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearings and or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on the agenda for consideration. Item 76, executive session.
So move for labor negotiation purposes only.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded to go into executive session to discuss labor negotiations only. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Is he still gone? Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0.
Human Resources Director and Attorney Mark McQueen, as well as I think the city attorney.
Yeah, you did. You did. That's true.
Roll call.
Oh, you got to restate.
We got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just came out of executive session where we only discussed labor negotiations. Motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Here.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. And then motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Meeting adjourned at 5:03 p.m.